what it's offering you is a new start, and a new start at a point in your life where you now have wisdom on your side. And I would say if you were not happy with that first part of your life and you found yourself in a position where everything that was unfolding around you was not of your making, not of your design, well then I definitely would not approach this next half, especially having a clean start with that same mentality. We can come at this with this perspective of, the victim mentality and boo-hoo, and we can do that because we are in this position, or we can look at it and see all the positive things that are possible in it and embrace it. I know that this isn't the common way of thinking, and I know that this is somewhat going against the grain, and I get it. But you also have to realize that a lot of your ideas and the ways that things are supposed to be, well, these things were instilled in you from a very young age. And, what if that programming was all wrong? Because life is precious and we only get one. And so the last thing you want to do is find yourself at the end of it full of regret. That's what I fear most. So we are taught from a fairly young age that the objective here is to eventually find a good job, find yourself a good partner to share life with, maybe have a few kids, a few pets, a nice yard with a white picket fence, and that's life. That's what we're trying to obtain here. That's the keys to happiness and success. And, we are suggested to do this at a fairly young age, somewhere in our early years of adulthood, so that, we have plenty of time to grow into this life, this adulthood, and to, save money so that someday in your elder years, you will be able to retire and be comfortable and secure. And, that age now is typically, I think it's up to like 67 now, 65, 67. And so, yeah, that's what we're taught. That's the objective. And if you can, meet that goal, you will find success and happiness. But what if you find yourself somewhere around the midway point and starting over? Well, that can be a terrifying thought, because typically, with that age comes some wisdom, right? Through life experiences and just, having been around the block for a little while. And so you understand that, these years ahead, this time that's remaining is precious. And when it is surrounded by uncertainties, well, it can be terrifying. And that's not a place the majority of people would like to find themselves. But what if you do find yourself there? What if you find yourself there either intentionally or unintentionally, fortunately or unfortunately? You are here. You are at the halfway point and you are starting over. Well, that happens to be where I'm at. And I feel like I have a little bit of experience in this area because I've been here for, the better part of a year or so. And I know that the feelings that can come along with this are negative in nature, and it can feel overwhelming. And so I wanted to make a little video about it to talk about this, because I've had a lot of time to think through this and to contemplate on it. And so I'm hoping that maybe if you are in a position such as this, that I can offer you some words of encouragement, because I think that being in this place at this time in your life, I think it offers some positivities too. I think it offers some things that perhaps may have escaped your purview. When you're in this situation and you're surrounded by all of this, the unknowns and the uncertainties and the fear that comes along with it. These positive thoughts, this optimistic way of viewing it, well, that tends to flee you. And so you don't typically, think like this. So maybe, this video can help rein it back in for you and provide a new way of looking at this so that you can, approach it with a different mindset and possibly see that it's not so bad after all, and that potentially what it's offering you is a new start, and a new start at a point in your life where you now have wisdom on your side. And so I think that's I think that's a powerful thing, because when we start out as early adults, that's something that we are definitely lacking. And so we go into a lot of these areas of life, blind in many ways, and we're just feeling things out. We're just kind of going with the flow here for a lot of people. And you end up finding yourself in a position that perhaps wasn't of your design. And, one of the things that I have realized is that the last place I want to be when I reach, the end of this thing, this journey of life, is on a deathbed full of regret. And I realized in this journey that that's the path I was on. And if this hadn't have happened, then that's most likely where I would have been sitting at the end of this thing. And so that's what ends up happening. We approach life with these objectives and goals that we are, programmed through society and, the behaviors of those that we are surrounded by and look to for these type of things, that this is the way to go, but oftentimes we find ourselves just rolling with the punches. And, I just think that life is too precious to just go with the punches. I think that it would be much better to be intentional with all of it, especially this. And so perhaps what this is offering up to you, if you do find yourself in this position, is an opportunity. And an opportunity where now when you approach it, you are not approaching it without knowledge and without wisdom. You now have years of insight and years of experience under your belt. And so I think it's safe to say you are much further ahead here now, starting over. And so you can cut out a lot of the mistakes that you may have previously made. And I would say if you were not happy with that first part of your life and you found yourself in a position where everything that was unfolding around you was not of your making, not of your design, well, then I definitely would not approach this next half, especially having a clean start with that same mentality and making those same mistakes. Because if you look at this as a clean slate and an opportunity to chase after the things that have eluded you up until this point, well, then I think the outcome could turn out a lot better. And, one of the things here, honestly, when you are in this position is that's really important is your perspective, because we can come at this with this perspective of, the victim mentality and boo-hoo. And, we can do that because we are in this position, or we can look at it and see all the positive things that are possible in it and embrace it. And so that is all just a matter of perspective and how you view this place that you're in. And so that's the thing, I think, that if we can step outside of the box just for a moment and leave those negative emotions attached to, maybe that old life, and try to come at this with a clean slate and a positive perspective with an optimistic outlook of what the future holds, well, then I think that you'll get off on a much better start here on this next phase of life, and possibly even better than where you would have been if things had continued the way that they were. Now, I do want to offer up just a little bit of backstory here regarding how I ended up in this position, because, regardless, the way that this happens can look a lot different, for everybody, obviously. And so I feel like the things that have happened, more recently in my life, these are the things that almost shaped this stage for me. And so I think by laying out some of my backstory, possibly, you'll be able to understand where it is that I'm coming from here and why I view these things this way. Because I know that, this isn't the common way of thinking. And, I know that this is somewhat going against the grain, and I get it. But you also have to realize that a lot of your ideas and the ways that things are supposed to be, well, these things were instilled in you from a very young age. And, what if that programming was all wrong? Because I think that there's a very good chance that it was, and that, the people that you were looking up to try and understand, what this thing called life looks like, well, maybe they were just also trapped in that same cycle. And so what you thought was the only way and the right way, well, maybe it wasn't. Because life is precious and we only get one. And so the last thing you want to do is find yourself at the end of it full of regret. That's what I fear most. But about 4 years ago now, 4.5 or so, I experienced a series of losses in my life that absolutely just flipped my world upside down. I mean, it was devastating. And it started out with losing my mother, in the beginning of the year 2022, at only 60 years old, to a massive heart attack, completely unexpected, no warning, and really just, it was crushing, to say the least. But as if that wasn't enough, 3 short days later, I mean, they seemed long at the time, but in only 3 short days later, I ended up losing my aunt as well. And then within another 4 months of that, my uncle was gone. And so I lost my complete childhood identity, and the people that I loved and that were a big part of who I was and my life. Well, they were now gone. And it was a very difficult time to get through, needless to say. And it took me a while. It took me years, actually, to come around. And I was in that low, dark place that entire time, continuing on with the motions of life, just, there, but not there. And internally just devastated, and this is the way, these things go, because life doesn't just stop because these things happen. Things have to carry on. And so you are forced into, joining in with time as it moves on. And so, in a lot of ways, looking back on it, I see where I was just numb going through life for years. And at a certain point, I realized that where I was at and the direction I was headed, it wasn't good. And if I didn't make a drastic change, then I would potentially be putting the remainder of my family, my children, my wife, my siblings, these other people that are around me that I still have and love, that I would be putting them in this vulnerable position to have to possibly experience another loss, because, it's obvious that my family's genetics are not the best and that we are, or at least seem to be, dying at a young age. And so the path that I was on and the way that I was living and taking care of myself, I recognized that this was potentially what was out in the future. And the thought of laying another devastating loss at the feet of those that I love around me, I couldn't bear it. And I understood that at least some of that was within my control. And so I began to think about this a lot. And that, if I'm being honest, I thought about it for a long time before I actually acted upon it. But eventually I did. And I knew that I had to grab a hold of something that I could use as a pillar for me to latch on to, that would be sturdy enough for me to pull myself out of this pit. And that thing that I chose was my health and fitness. And I began to focus in on that. And really, over a period of time, I got dialed in, and it went from, struggling to show up each day to eventually thinking about it throughout the day, almost looking forward to it, to actually looking forward to it and enjoying it. And it became a major part of my life. And I was in this locked in phase with my health and fitness for a good year and a half. And at around 45 years old, I think I was possibly in the best shape of my life. I was trail running a lot. I was lifting weights an hour and a half a day, like 5-6 days a week. I was eating on point. I was paying attention to my caloric intake and the amount of protein. I mean, I was locked in, and this new thing gave me something to focus all that negative energy on, and to almost use it as a fuel to empower me in this new area that I was very much, enveloped in at this time. And so, I was feeling good, and physically I was in pretty tremendous shape. I had went from, at the time I started, around 170 pounds to, at the peak of this thing, around 200. And so, I put on a lot of muscle, and I was just feeling good. I was feeling good. And when you feel good physically, typically your mind follows. And so things began to change, and I was finally feeling good again, but I still had all this baggage, but for the most part, I was in a whole different place, and I finally had things under what I thought were my control. And, I was doing everything right. And so this thing, I was able to flip it around, and that gave me a lot of hope, for the future. And at the time, I had been at my job for, around 7 years, a very good job, high paying job, something that, I enjoyed the work. And, things were just good. Finally, things had seemed to have turned around. And just like life often does, it just comes along and boom, knocks you over again, right? And this is my experience. I feel like this is what I've experienced in life, is that it just has a way of kicking you when you're down. And if you do get back up, well, it's just going to come along and knock you back down again. And this has been my experience. And so towards the end of 2024, it was actually just days before Christmas, I woke up one morning with this feeling in my back, and I knew something wasn't right, but whatever, I just figured I tweaked my back as the day went on. It would gradually get worse. And then in the evenings at about 5 o'clock, on the dime every night at about 5 o'clock, this would get so bad that I'd have to sit down with pillows and a heating pad shoved into my back. And this went on for weeks. Now, at the time, because of the holidays, I was off work. I had, the holidays, I had vacation put in. I was off for, until the beginning of the new year, I had scheduled to be off. And so this is what I was going through in these first days of the holidays. And, this went on for almost 2 weeks. And then I hit a point where, about a week into this, I woke up with it, and it was there all day, and it was excruciating, torturous pain. I mean, off the charts pain. And it got so bad that I was questioning if it was my back, or if it was cancer or something, worse, because the way that it felt, and the pain was like in my side and in my groin, and I was just unsure. And the level of pain was so intense that I thought that maybe this is something different than this. And so I did eventually go to the emergency room. In the new year, I had suffered through it for a couple of weeks. It got to this point, and I ended up going to the emergency room. And then this whole thing began. And I don't want to bog this down with all that, but in the end, I ended up on short-term disability because of this, because it ultimately, this pain and this predicament that I found myself in, it lasted a good 3 months. And the system and the way that it took so long to get answers. I mean, the 6 months of short-term disability that I had, it ran out, and I had still at this point not had answers, and I was by no means ready to return to work. There was just no way. I mean, at that point, I wasn't in this excruciating pain, but it was still there, and I was in fear that I would do something to end up back in that place. And obviously, my employer wanted no part of that, because my job was physical, and there was probably a good chance that something would happen at work with this, and then it would be a workman's comp thing. And so I didn't want anything to do with that, and neither did my employer. And so next thing you know, boom, my job's gone, and here I am. And, the thing is, this time I was forced into my head, honestly. I was forced to spend a lot of time with myself in my head, because I couldn't move from where I was at, with pillows and heating pads, and just, I couldn't do anything for months and months and months. And then that, eventually the pain alleviated enough, but it was still, I couldn't do anything for a long time. And that entire time I was in my head, thinking constantly. And, I realized that I had focused so much the last year and a half on my physical health, that I completely lost sight of my mental health and my spiritual health. And, I recognized this, and, this thing that I was going through, it was forcing me to pay attention to these things. And I was in a position where I couldn't even focus on my physical health. I mean, within the first month and a half, I had pretty much lost a lot of my gains. And within 3 months to 6 months, I'd say they were pretty much all gone. And so, yeah, I mean, this ended up being a very, discouraging, depressing, difficult time, to go through. And Now, though, in hindsight, when I look at it, I realize that there was a lot of undealt with business internally. I had been focusing so much on the physical aspects that I completely lost sight of, the internal ones. And, I guess I just kind of assumed that because I was at this new place physically that, that was it and everything was good. And, what I realize now is that I put a block up so that I could embrace, the physical aspects of it. And that block had remained up. And, a year and a half later, yeah, I was in a lot better shape, but not better internally. And so now this whole thing had forced me into, focusing on the internal and having a lot of time to think. I realized that although, all these things looked really good, my job and where I was at, that I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. There were a lot of things that bothered me about those, areas of my life, but I, just again, like we often do, I was just going with the flow and, trying to be grateful for what it is that I had. And so, I basically had settled for the default and, I allowed myself to be content with where I was at. And this place that I was now at, I was forced into to evaluating all of that and to evaluate, my mental health and my spiritual health. And I realized that I was still very unwell and that I had a lot of demons that needed dealt with. And, you know, working out's great, focusing on physical things. This is all great, but, that's only part of your well-being. And, the other part is just as important, if not more important. And so I began to realize this and I began to think about, where I was at and this place that I had found myself in now with, this unknown future out ahead of me. And, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I was, ready to grab a hold of it and run with it because I don't think that that's ever the thought. It's a very hard thing to break free of all the conditioning and everything that is all, associated with life and the way that we view it. And so it took me a while to overcome all that. But then there was a certain point where I realized, what, this direction that I was headed, it was taking me to the thing that I feared most. And that was the deathbed full of regret. And I realized that there had been a lot of things that were important to me and things that I was passionate about that I had left fall at the wayside as I chased after, the highest paying job and, this feeling of security. And I was now at a place where I was forced to start over. And, it could be that all of the loss, I'm sure that all of the loss played into this, but when you experience things that dramatic in that short of a time, your perspective begins to change on life and the things that are important. And that shift was so profound for me that I recognized that this was actually absolutely an opportunity to do the things that were always, things that I desired to do, but didn't because I didn't need to. Right. And so this being one of them, I mean, for years I had thought about, doing this and, especially with my story and everything that unfolded around it. I thought that there was something valuable in that, and that I should, put it out there so that perhaps other people may find value in it and get something from it. And so this had been something that I had fought against for years, and it goes way back actually, because I have another channel where I cover other type of content, and that was something that I had been wanting to do for almost 15 years. And so now I'm in a place where I am doing these things. And it's weird because, we can choose these things in life, or sometimes these things just happen. And when they do, you are faced with the reality that you're here, and this is the hand you're dealt, and you better do something with it. And so, that's how it worked out for me. And that's going to look different for everybody. And the people who actually recognize this at the midway point in life, that they're not happy and that they need change, and they just drop everything and go after it. These people, I absolutely applaud these people. And I realize it takes a lot of courage to do something like that. In my situation, I was forced into it. And I think that in some weird way, whether you want to call it God or the universe or whatever, okay, I think that, things happen for a reason. And I think that where I was at, and with my mindset, the way that I am, I would have never done this if I wasn't forced into it. And I think that I just feel like this is what I was supposed to do. And it's this feeling that I have, even though, I've been doing it for a while now and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It's still, there's something in me that drives me with this, because I feel like I'm supposed to be doing it. And so that's a good feeling. I didn't have that going to work every day. That was a feeling, I have to do this. I have to do this. This is something I have to do. And I mean, not that this doesn't come with those same pressures, but it's different. It's different because there's something internally gratifying, and I feel almost as if I'm finally, in line with my purpose. Whereas before, I was in line with the goals that were set before me at a very young age. And yeah. So anyway, enough about me. Back to you. If you are somebody who finds yourself in this position, and you are surrounded by these emotions of the unknown, these overwhelming feelings of insecurity and doubt and all of these things, just know that you are now at a different point in life. And you are at a point where you have some things that are on your side that were not there when you started. And those things are knowledge, experience, wisdom, and, in my opinion, the most important part, you are now cognizant of time and the fact that there is little of it remaining out in front of you. And so, in my opinion, these ingredients are the ingredients in the recipe to success. And they are absolutely things that you don't come into until you hit this point. And so maybe try and look at it like you are actually in a good spot now. And finally, the things that have always eluded you in this life, well, finally, you can go after them. And maybe you will come into something where you finally find meaning and feel fulfillment in your purpose. And if I could give you just one suggestion of advice, whatever it is that you're passionate about, whatever it is that stirs you up inside and that you find this passion for, it is that thing that I would pursue. That's the unfortunate thing starting out, in your earlier adulthood, because for a lot of people, that's not what you pursue. You pursue the best option that's before you, and that will ultimately lead you to a place where you are now living a life that you did not design. And so this time you have a fresh start. You can chase after that passion and make it your purpose, and perhaps find peace and fulfillment in this second stage of your life. Anyway, hopefully this has helped. Listen, it's never too late, bloomers. So let's get after it. Anyway, I'm Brad Casper. This is Casper's Corner. Till the next one, subscribe. We're out.